For over 1,000 years, Vikings have captured our imagination. Feared as ruthless raiders who brought terror to Europe, yet admired as daring explorers and cunning traders who shaped the course of history. But were they really heroes or villains? And how did their incredible voyages begin? It all started with one man's trash. While most people today think of Vikings as ferocious fighters, only about 15% of them actually made their money from raiding. Most Vikings were farmers, traders, or craftsmen, but when those routes were cut off by war or bad weather, many turned to the sea for survival. And that's when the Viking Age began, a period of exploration and conquest that lasted from the 8th to the 11th century. During this time, Vikings traveled across Europe and beyond, exploring new lands and establishing trading posts. They were responsible for the first European settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and even North America, almost 500 years before Christopher Columbus arrived. But their impact on history didn't end there. Vikings also played a key role in the development of medieval Russia, where they established a state that lasted for centuries. So were Vikings heroes or villains? I'll let you decide. Did you know that the Vikings were real? And no, they weren't just big, scary dudes with axes and a taste for pillaging. They were actually complex people with a rich culture and history. The Vikings originated in Scandinavia around the late 8th century, an area that today includes modern-day Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. Life there was harsh. Long winters, rocky soil, and limited resources meant that communities had to adapt and change. Not all Vikings were warriors. Many were farmers, traders, and skilled craftsmen. Their society valued things like loyalty, bravery, and reputation, qualities that would define both their raids and their settlements. As a result, Viking culture is one of the most fascinating in history. And if you want to learn more about it, stay tuned because we've only just begun to explore the world of the Vikings. Why do we remember the Vikings as scary? Well, European history remembers Vikings first and foremost as invaders. From the monastery at Lindisfarne in 793 AD, two towns along the French and English coasts, the Vikings struck with precision. Their longships allowed them to travel quickly along rivers and seas, giving them the element of surprise. And their attacks were brutal, taking out entire villages in a single day. But Vikings weren't just mindless brutes. They were intelligent, calculating, and ambitious. They weren't just looking to cause havoc. They were looking for wealth, for resources, for influence. And they knew exactly where to strike. They targeted monasteries and coastal towns that were poorly defended, that had valuable resources, and that would make the rulers of Europe nervous. So next time you think of the Vikings, don't just think of horned helmets and war. Think of a calculated, intelligent people who knew how to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. The Vikings are known for their violence, but their story is more than just war and bloodshed. But before there was pillaging and plundering, there was trading and settling. The Vikings connected Scandinavia to the rest of Europe, the Middle East, and even North America. On their voyages, they exchanged goods, culture, and knowledge, founding towns, establishing trade routes, and integrating with local populations. Archaeological evidence shows that Viking communities thrived through commerce as much as conquest. Here are some of their treasures. These silver coins were used across Viking territories as far away as Iraq and Egypt. They traded jewelry made from precious metals like gold and silver, and these small tools were likely used by a craftsman making even smaller tools. Vikings were explorers ahead of their time. They sailed across the North Atlantic to Iceland, Greenland, and even Vinland, which is modern-day Newfoundland, in Canada. Their ships were fast and sturdy, able to withstand the harsh conditions of the open sea, and they had the skills and knowledge to navigate using the stars and the currents. But what really makes Vikings special is their spirit of adventure and their desire to push beyond the known world. They were the pioneers of the North Atlantic, brave and curious, exploring new lands and making epic discoveries long before other Europeans would dare to venture into the unknown. Their legacy lives on in the places they explored and the stories that have survived to tell their tales. So let's raise a glass to the Vikings, the heroes who dared to explore the vastness of the ocean and expand our understanding of the world. Not all Vikings were mindless marauders. In fact, recent archaeological evidence suggests that they were more like superheroes than you might think. But don't get me wrong, Vikings were violent, but that was only one aspect of their culture. They had a sophisticated legal system, and they made important community decisions together in assemblies called things. Warfare was ritualized and often tied to social status. Vikings would go to war to defend their land and their people, but also to gain glory and treasure. Contrary to popular belief, they were actually quite disciplined and strategic in their approach to battle. They were also excellent sailors and traders, and they established a number of thriving communities across Europe and beyond. So the next time you hear the word Viking, don't just think of blood and thunder, think of honor, courage, and community, because that's what made them who they were, and that's why some people still view them as heroes today. We've all seen the horned helmet, right? But did Vikings actually wear them? Well, not if they followed the archaeological evidence. That stuff is mostly a myth. I mean, there's this idea that Vikings were these bloodthirsty berserkers, which is also not really accurate. Don't get me wrong, they could be violent, but they were also adaptable, inventive, and resourceful. I think what we can learn from them is that they had the biggest ships of their time, but they also had the most sophisticated ships of their time. I mean, look at this, it's a Viking ship burial from the 8th century. These guys were sailing to Vinland, which is now part of Canada, almost 500 years before Christopher Columbus was even born. They were also incredible metal workers. I mean, this is a Viking brooch from the 9th century. It's made from silver and gold and it's absolutely exquisite. So, yeah, Vikings, they were more than just horned helmets and berserkers, like we all have. The Vikings, a legendary group of people who lived in Scandinavia from the 8th to the 11th century. They're known for their brutal raids, their incredible ships, and their lasting impact on European history. Their influence can be seen in the languages, laws, and culture of many European countries. And many of the towns and cities they founded still exist today. While it's true that the Vikings were invaders to some, bringing death and destruction wherever they went, to others they were heroes of exploration, trade, and cultural exchange. Their story reminds us that history is rarely black and white. Were Vikings invaders or heroes? Well, both, really. But as the centuries passed, they became known for their incredible feats of exploration and their thirst for knowledge. But why? Why did they do all of this? Well, the answer is simple: survival. The Vikings lived in a harsh environment and had to be constantly on the lookout for new sources of food and resources. This led them to explore uncharted waters and establish settlements in far-off lands. Invasions were also common because, well, it was easy. The Vikings were fierce fighters, and they took advantage of this by raiding other settlements and taking what they wanted. But despite all of this, Vikings were also known for their bravery, their ingenuity, and their sense of adventure. They were also incredibly ambitious and wanted to leave their mark on the world. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Viking history, hit like, subscribe, and click the bell to uncover more stories that shaped our world. And remember, history is always richer than we imagine.